few years ago, a couple came to me after, let's call it wasting $40,000 and many months of their life. The problem was that they bought land without checking the zoning first. They just assumed that they'd be able to build what they wanted to. Now, unfortunately, by the time they'd finished their design with their designer, they'd come so far from what they wanted that they were questioning whether they should even build what they have. And that's how they ended up talking to us for a second opinion. After talking to them, there's a few key things that I noticed. Their time wasted, their budget, quite a bit of it was blown, and their confidence totally shattered. That's the thing about building a house. You don't lose control in the middle, you lose it right at the start. Building a house from scratch, it's one of the biggest investments of your life. Time, money, and control. You want all three of these on your side. You'll hear me say this a lot, and I can't emphasize it enough. Today, I'll walk you through everything you need to know to build a house from the ground up. We'll be covering the legalities, and of course, the costs, and who you want on your dream team. We'll talk about the design process and the permit process at your city. Let's get into it. Before you dream about your floor plans, you need land. Not just any land, the right land. And to find it, you need to ask the right questions. Every piece of land comes with something called zoning laws. Well, I should say most pieces of land. If you live in an urban setting or even in a rural setting, then most likely your land is going to have some zoning rules that apply to it. The zoning rules talk about what you can build, how wide, the floor area, how high, and if you don't check this, then you might end up with land that doesn't let you build what you want. On the legal side, every piece of land comes with something that we call legal restrictions. Now, these are right-of-ways, covenants, and easements. Now, chances are, if you're buying a piece of land, you've heard of these words before. And if you haven't, then you want to figure out what they mean. We'll go into more detail about these in another video. These are like invisible roadblocks that can dictate what and where you can build. Not only that, but they can dictate how you build and what you can use your land for. So, as you can tell already, they're pretty important. Get a surveyor and a lawyer to decode these if they're on your property title before you start. Next is the best and cheapest step that you can do before you purchase a piece of land. Go down to your local city hall and ask them what's possible. More than likely, you'll discover something you didn't know. This should be one of the very first things that you do. Now, let's talk about the money. How much will it cost? You need real numbers before you break ground. So how do you figure them out? There's a few ways to go about it. The first step is calling local builders. Construction costs change from city to city and surprisingly, even from neighborhood to neighborhood. Call local contractors and compare some prices. Now, this isn't something that's going into too much detail, so most builders won't mind sharing this information, but usually you can expect something in the form of a cost per square foot. And let's say something that's between $250 to $350 a square foot. Next, do your research online. Now, this is as simple as pulling up Google or something like ChatGPT now is quite helpful. You want to pop in something like search for your local city and residential building costs. And most likely you'll get some values in the form of cost per square foot again. Now you can already see between the cost per square foot numbers from your builders and from searching online, you're gonna see some numbers that come up again and again, or at least within the same range. And you can start feeling confident in these numbers. Once you have a good ballpark range across several sources, it's time to talk to a lender. Banks and lenders will typically want to see a budget, plans, and in some cases, they'll even want to see a construction agreement. Plan ahead now so you're not scrambling later. Next, we have building your dream team. A modern house, for better or for worse, is not built by one person, it's built by a whole team. Even before you build, there's a whole team involved on the pre-construction or the design side of things. So let's go over who you're going to need. And to keep it simple for you, we've listed it in a chronological order, the same chronological order that they'll come up in your project. The surveyor, they're going to map out your property lines, your elevations, and those pesky legal restrictions. they'll show exactly where they show up on your property and how far back you have to stay from them. The next consultant you'll want to get is an arborist. Now, you don't just need an arborist when there's trees on your property, but you also need them when there's trees around your property or maybe your neighbor's property. A lot of buildings end up quite close to the property lines. If there's a huge protected tree on your neighbor's property and its root protection zone goes out 15-20 feet, that's cutting a significant chunk into your buildable area. You're going to want to know that before you get started. Arborists will check the health of the trees and make recommendations on whether they could or should be removed, and they'll also show you the process towards getting them removed if needed. Next, we have your designer or architect. This is the consultant that is going to turn your dream into a reality. Not with magic, but through building codes and bylaws. After your design is made, you're going to need someone to engineer the structure. Next up is the structural engineer. No surprise there. The structural engineer will make sure that your house is able to handle all the loads, and that includes the live loads such as the occupants, that'll be yourself and your guests, and things like dead loads, which is, for example, snow loads. They're going to make sure that your house stands strong for years to come. Now, you may or may not need a geotechnical engineer. If you're in an area with not the greatest soil that doesn't have the best bearing capacity, then you're going to need some sort of geotech solutions. Now, most of the time that won't be the case, but be prepared for this. Geotechnical engineers will run tests if necessary and relay that information back to your structural engineer to make sure everyone's on the same page. Next, we have septic consultants. Now, these aren't going to be needed for every project, but let's say you're in an area that's not connected to your local city sewage system, or maybe you're in a very rural area and there is none for miles away. In that case, you're going to need a septic system designed. So they look at all the plumbing in the house, usually the number of bathrooms and fixtures, and they size the septic system accordingly. Next, we have energy consultants. Now, these are one of the newer consultants, and they haven't been around for very long, probably less than a decade. And they came about as a result of the central planner's push to make more energy efficient houses. What they do is they take your design and they take your local weather data, and that includes things like temperatures, the number of sun days, not Sundays, but days with sun, and they'll use that information and help you spec out things like your insulation values, and that includes your walls, your ceilings, your floors. They'll help you spec out your HVAC equipment. And how that kind of manifests is, let's say you have a very energy efficient envelope. Well, there's a good chance that you'll need smaller equipment than you would for an envelope that was not so energy efficient or leaking air or not so much insulation. Now, check with your local city hall to see if this consultant is required for you. We have interior designers. If you want a personalized space that flows and has a high-end feel, the interior designer is a must. They'll make sure that your inside is cohesive and just pretty, and it matches the outside of your home. Last, we have the orchestrator, the builder, or the general contractor. Now, they run the construction. They're going to be helping you choose trades. They're going to be helping you move the project along on schedule. And you're going to want to make sure you like this person because you're going to be spending a lot of time with them over the next 6 to 12 months. Now, every team needs a leader. And if you're not hiring a project manager, then that leader is going to be you. Own that role. A lot of areas allow owners to build their own homes as owner builders. If that's something you're looking to do, get a head start on that because there's a good chance there's going to be some tests involved and some studying involved. And now we have the design process. One of the most common questions we get as designers is, how long will it take to design my house? And unfortunately, the answer is, it depends on a lot of things. But in general, custom homes take a fair bit of time, and spec homes will go a lot faster because they're following a preset plan with minimum modifications. But in general, here's what the process looks like. Step 1 is your initial discovery meeting with your designer. This is where you bring your wish list, your budget, your inspirations, and you want to make sure all of your stakeholders are involved. And what that means is most of your family, because at the end of the day, the last thing you want to do is make changes later in the process because someone finally saw the design and they didn't like something or another. Now, I would advise that you are open and transparent with your designer. Since they're not compensated based on costs or anything like that, once you get in an agreement with them, it's going to be a fixed cost and they'll help you navigate the process, but they can only do that if they know what you're aspiring to build and if they know accurately how much of a budget you're working with. They can select materials accordingly, and at the end of the day, that's going to save you a lot of money. Step 2 is your site and zoning analysis. Now, you remember earlier on we were talking about going to the city and getting some free information from them. Well, this is where we expand on that step. Your designer is going to determine what's possible based on square footage allowances, setbacks, lot coverage, your local building codes, and factoring in those pesky right-of-ways and restrictions. After all that's concluded, the next step is the conceptual design. Now, this is the first concept draft of your home. This is going to include floor plans and an approximate exterior massing so you can get a feel for how the building's coming together. At this stage, expect to make a few revisions until you get it right. Typically, we end up needing between 2 to 3 revisions to dial it in perfectly according to the client's desires. After the conceptual design, the next step is design development. This is where the layout is refined, the materials are chosen, and ensuring the design fits within both local regulations and provincial or state building codes. Once your design is set in stone, you move on to the next step, which is what we call the consultant phase. Now, all those consultants that we mentioned earlier, like your septic designer, your engineers, your home design now gets sent off to them, first for quotes, and then eventually for their design work. Your structural, civil, and geotechnical engineers will complete their scopes and sign off on the required liabilities. Finally, everything comes back to your designer or your project manager, and it's assembled according to the building permit application requirements. These are often set out on your city's website, and if they're not, you can always visit them to get a checklist. The plans are finalized and ensure everything that's needed for the application is there. Each phase is like a milestone. You don't want to skip ahead, otherwise that rushing can cost you time and money down the line. Okay, well done. Now you're done the design work. Now is a test of your patience. The city permit process and permit approval. You can't build without permission, for better or for worse. The city will review your plans and make sure everything fits their engineering and utility requirements, their trees and parks requirements, building code compliances, and if necessary, variances. We'll talk about these more in another video. Engineering ensures proper connections are there for utilities. That includes your electrical, that includes your sewer if it's available, your water if it's available, and your drainage connections. Trees and parks. As mentioned earlier, if your site or if in the vicinity of your site are protected trees, and every city has different definitions of what qualifies as a protected tree, then this review step really matters. And you want to make sure you get ahead of this with your arborist, otherwise a lot of time can be spent here that can be quite unnecessary. After your engineering and your arborist department reviews, the next step is your building code compliant. Now you notice they don't check your building code compliance until your previous steps are completed, and that's for good reason, because there's no sense in reviewing your plans unless the previous requirements are met. That way your house won't be changing. Your plans must meet local construction standards. Not only that, but structural and safety regulations as well. The good news is, if you hired a knowledgeable designer, you'll be going into this step fully confident and assured. And the last and optional step is variances. If your design doesn't fit the zoning, you may need to apply for a variance permit. Now that's a step of its own, and like I mentioned, it'll be discussed in more detail in another video. The thing you need to know right now is, if you have what they consider a genuine hardship, then there's a good chance your variance permit will go smoothly. If they think you're kind of using it to get some extra advantages, and more than likely you're going to have some difficulties with this step. Okay, so the review is complete and your permit is issued. What comes next? Now the real work begins. Construction will follow a set order. Now, this is not going to be an in-depth construction video, but we're going to go over the key steps in chronological order so you have an idea of what to expect. But you can also expect an in-detail construction video coming up soon. Now, things usually begin with site prep and demolition if there's any existing buildings on the property. Your land will be cleared, graded, and prepared for setting the foundation. After that, we have the utilities and infrastructure. You want to get this all done while the ground is dug up. You'll connect your sewer, your water, electrical, and any other services. After that's done, foundation and framing. First, your concrete is poured for the foundation, and then your structure, whether that be of wood or nowadays we see ICF, which is insulated concrete forms, or another building material, it'll be built up after the foundation. After the structure is up, you have your roofing and your exterior envelope. This is the weatherproofing of your home. After this is done and your home is locked up with doors and windows, you have your electrical, plumbing, and mechanical. These are all the features that will be involved in the daily operation of your home. Usually the mechanical systems are installed first. That includes your HVAC and your plumbing, and then the lighting and the heating. Next up, we have the insulation. Now, this is a key step. It's going to make sure your envelope is complete and preferably airtight. Remember that energy efficiency we mentioned earlier? Well, after this, if you had an energy advisor involved, then they'll be coming in to do what's called a blower door test, where they essentially pressurize your home and measure the amount of air leaking out to determine how airtight your home is. Usually, energy advisors have maximum levels of air leakage that your home must comply with. Otherwise, you're going to have to take alternative measures to reach these airtightness levels. Let's hope you get it right on the first time. If you have an experienced builder who's done this before, there's not much to worry about. Then we have your drywall and interior finishes. So let's say your blower test went well, you got the go-ahead and the clearance to go ahead and board up everything. Your house will get more airtight as you add drywall and finishes on top. Now, your finishes include things like your flooring, your cabinetry, your countertops, your shower doors, and your lighting and plumbing fixtures. Lastly, when all that's done, you have the final inspection. The inspector will come through to make sure everything is done to code and that all the fixtures are working properly. The last thing you want is homes that when you turn on the cold water, the hot water comes out, and when you turn on the hot water, the cold water comes out. And believe it or not, it happens more often than you would think. Once your final inspection's passed, you will have your occupancy certificate, and that's the final approval you need before you can move in. With all that said, I hope you have a clear picture of what the construction process will look like. There's many factors involved in construction, and it's usually why clients like to trust us with this process. It's our area of expertise, and knowing the right people and people you trust can make the process so much smoother and headache-free. But of course, our video is also for our DIYers out there, the owner builders. And we want to equip you with the best knowledge, regardless of your situation, and so that you can move forward without missing any steps, which results in costly mistakes. Building a home is a game of control. The more you know now, the better decisions you can make. And that's how you build a home that lasts and stay cool as a cucumber while you do it. If you found this helpful, hit the like button, we appreciate it, and subscribe, and check out our other videos if you like related content. We'll see you guys on the next one.